All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for joining us today for our Catalyst Grant Program information session. This is a new grant program that we're offering from the Boise City Department of Arts and History. It's a pilot program for this fiscal year. I just put in the chat if everyone can hear me okay. Hopefully it seems like the answer is yes. We'll go ahead and get started. And please feel free to use the Q&A option if there are any questions that come up during the presentation, and I'll make sure to save some time at the end to answer those questions. Let me go ahead and share my screen. All right, so again, hello. Today is January 4th, 2024. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll be focusing most of this session on the Catalyst Grant Pilot Program on round 1 specifically. There'll be 4 total rounds for this grant program, so there'll be more information sessions coming over the next few months. I'd like to acknowledge the ancestral, cultural, and traditional and unceded territory of the Shoshone, Bannock, and Northern Paiute tribes from which I'm presenting from here today. And I also want to thank you for being live. We are recording this, so we wanted to make sure that you could watch it live, watch it recorded later, refer back to it if you had any questions or wanted to see any of the information. So please feel free to look back on it. It'll be on our website, boiseartsandhistory.org. We'll go ahead and get started. So you can see me. Here's also a picture of me. My name is Emily Shivers. I'm the new Grants and Public Programs Manager for the Boise City Department of Arts and History. I'm so excited to be here with you today and working with you moving forward. Just to save time, if you have any questions that are more specific to your particular project or something you're interested in applying for, you can email me, you can call me. I'm also piloting office hours on Wednesdays and Thursdays during each of the open windows for the grant program. And so you can sign up for those or just reach out and schedule a time with me. That works as well. But I'm always available, always happy to chat about any ideas that you have and see if there might be any funding opportunities from us here in the city or elsewhere. All right. So today, quickly, we are going to talk about the Catalyst Grant Program, just an overview. We'll go through criteria for the program, what we're looking for, types of programs that you might apply for, funding for, and then application basics. I also plan on talking through a few suggestions, things to consider or think about when you're applying. And also at the end, as I mentioned, we'll cover any questions. So please feel free to use the Q&A function. And then if that doesn't work for you or you just want to reach out to me, feel free to give me a call afterwards, email me directly. I'd be happy to talk through any of your ideas. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. So we'll talk a little bit about the program. As I mentioned, this is a pilot program and it's meant to support kind of small, emerging and mid-sized arts, history and cultural activities from organizations and individuals. So this includes things like public programs, events, projects, exhibitions, tours, etc. Throughout this fiscal year ending in on September 30th, 2024. We chose the name Catalyst because we really wanted it to help spark quick change. We wanted there to be more frequent application opportunities for this, sort of pilot this new framework for the grant program and allow it to really impact the community more quickly. So a bit about the program. This program, there's about $40,000 available in funding before the end of the fiscal year. We are asking that It is a standard award size of $2,000. So I know maybe some of you may be familiar with the annual grant program, which will still be happening, and still applications will still be opening in the spring for that as usual. However, this and where that has the option for applying between 1 to 5,000, this one is a standard award amount of $2,000. We also will be accepting applications, as I mentioned, 4 rounds with deadlines in February, April, June, and August. We're in round 1, so the application window is open starting on Tuesday and will be open until February 2nd. We'll talk a little bit more about those windows in just a minute. We will be able to fund up to 5 projects for each round. And so just so you know, if for some reason we don't receive a full number of applicants, 5 full applicants, or maybe they don't meet eligibility or criteria, then any of the unexpended funds will be rolled over to the next round. So we do want to make sure that we spend that full 40,000 before the end of the fiscal year. We do ask that, again, because it is within this fiscal year, that activities need to be completed with final reports submitted to me through Zoom grants prior to September 30th, 2024. We did give a little bit of wiggle room for round 4 since it comes up pretty close to that deadline. So there is a few extra weeks to turn in that final report, with that deadline being October 15th, but I will show more about that in just a moment. So as we mentioned, timeline. So there are 4 rounds. The first round starts January 2nd, so open now through Zoom grants, closes on February 2nd. So each round has about a 1-month open window to apply. We say that there'll be about 3 weeks for us to do our internal panel review. And the panelists are made up of community members as well as our Arts and History Commission members. And so there's also an active and open call for panelists. So if you know anyone that might be interested, you can also find out more about that on our Arts and History, Boise Arts and History webpage, and send that out. But please note that if you do apply to be a panelist, you cannot apply for that grant. So if you apply to be a Catalyst panelist, you cannot apply for the Catalyst grant program, but you could apply for the annual program. So just keep that in mind if you're interested in that opportunity, or if you know anyone that might be. So it takes about 3 weeks for turnaround time for an answer, and then applicants will be notified for round 1 by February 23rd. And again, that project just needs to happen prior to September 30th, 2024, with that being the deadline for the final report. All right, and then quickly, program eligibility. And again, just a reminder, I'm seeing a few questions coming in the chat, or in the, Q&A. Please continue to send those in. Some of them might be answered soon, but if you have them, please put them in there and I'll make sure to address them before we leave here today. So the next round, or the next slide here, talks about program eligibility. So first off, proposals must be completed by an individual or representative of an organization or a nonprofit friends group that could be associated with a government agency. It also must directly benefit residents of Boise. So it must be put on by an organization based in Boise, or it must take place within Boise city limits to benefit the public in Boise. So if you are located outside of Boise city limits, but are still interested in doing a project within the city limits, that would still be eligible. But if you're thinking of doing something, let's say outside of Boise city limits, Meridian, Star, Emmett, anywhere outside, that project would not be eligible. So please keep that in mind when you're thinking about projects or programs. It can only be within and benefiting Boise residents. We also ask that it meet the ADA, any event or program venues meet ADA requirements, which you can find on our website, and I'll talk more about where you can find all of this information on our website. but you can learn more about what those requirements are. Also, it has to comply with the Boise City Department of Arts and History Equal Opportunity Statement, which you can see here, that we do not discriminate in our programs and activities based on race, religion, national origin, sex, age, sexual orientation, gender identity, and or disability. So we just ask that it also meet that criteria, meet that for eligibility. And then something a little different than maybe our annual program is we are asking that everyone use the budget template that is provided. It is provided on our website. It is provided within the Zoom Grants application. I can also send you a copy if you need it sent directly to your email. Just let me know. I can make sure you get that. But in order to be eligible for review by our panel, we need it to be in our budget template, which I will talk about actually right now. So the budget template, first off, the first part is the expenses page. So I'll kind of just highlight a few things for you to be aware of and to note. So you'll note that there are item descriptions. Please don't change those headings. And those headings are just for you to think through things like planning and administration, artists, historians, or cultural expertise, the cost for those people, as well as technical and production. And you'll notice that below there are options for other expenses, and you're more than welcome if something is not captured by those descriptions, you can add them in below and provide the explanation for what those are below. So we're hoping that these expenses pretty much capture all that you would spend on an event or project program that you are applying for. You also please note, you don't need to fill in every column of the budget sheet. The budget sheet is just for you to plan out what your expenses will be for the project that you're applying for. It might be what the venue rental cost is, etc. So maybe you have a venue that you don't have to pay for. You can leave that line blank if that makes sense for your project. So don't feel like every line has to have something in it. Just make sure that you are being as comprehensive and as detailed as you can be in the budget. Cash expenses, what that means is those things that you have to pay for directly. So that would be, like I said, a venue rental is a good example that you would have to pay for from your budget. In-kind and volunteer, those are expenses that you would normally pay for, but may be donated, or someone might be discounting their time or volunteer hours. And we do include a suggestion for how to calculate volunteer hours based off of the independent sector organizations calculations for 2023. So feel free to use those or use however you calculate volunteer time in your own organization. Also, please note other expenses. So again, those are things not included in the headings that we provide. And just a note, you'll see that yellow highlighted square in the Excel sheet. That is your project expenses total, and it must match your project income. Basically, what we want to see is you have to have the necessary funding to complete the project that you're applying for. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. So this is the expenses portion of the budget. So all the things that you're going to be paying for or that are being volunteered at an in-kind or volunteer basis. And then for income, this is going to be, again, you don't need to fill out every row or column if it doesn't make sense for your proposal. But basically all the ways that all the income that you're anticipating to get for your project. You don't need to fill out every row or column. You only need to fill out the income that applies to your proposal. Secured is confirmed funds that you know you have to spend on this project. Expected are funds that are being requested or expected but have not been officially secured. So if you're applying for other grants or you're anticipating a sponsorship, that would be where you would include that information. As I mentioned, this is a standard award of $2,000. So that is what we would potentially be funding your project at. So keep that in mind. That number stays the same. So that is a little different than our annual program and how we do the budget for that. So just keep that in mind. And so this is where your income of what you're expected to spend or the funding you have available for the project should match your expenses. And I will mention that this project can be 100% of your funding. So if your project is anticipated to cost $2,000 and you're asking for this funding for $2,000, that is okay. I know in the past our annual program is a little bit different, but for this, it can be 100% of the funding for your project. So please keep that in mind as well. All right, I see some questions coming in, and I'm just going to check through and make sure. I think I answered one about if this grant is only available for Boise. So yes, it is only available for Boise or must benefit Boise residents if you're from an organization that is based outside of Boise. So keep that in mind. So when the grant will be awarded, I'll talk about that in a minute. So hold tight on that one. Looks like most of these I think I will answer, so I'll keep going. But again, we'll save some time at the end to answer those questions. So thank you. Please keep them coming in. Okay, so we'll talk really briefly about criteria for this grant program. So the proposals will be evaluated, I mentioned, by our grant panel review committee. And so they'll be looking for the following items here, and I'll go into a little bit more detail for each one. But quality, community benefit, alignment with the City of Boise and Arts and History Department mission, which I'll talk about, accessibility, and we have a definition of accessibility for this particular grant program. Obviously, accessibility is huge, and we will always make sure to make things accessible, but I'll talk a little bit more about what we're looking for specifically for this program, and then management of the grant. So we'll kind of dive into quality first. So we are looking for clear descriptions in the application. We want to know artistic, historic, cultural components and how the funding will be used. So please make sure to include that when you're answering those application questions. We also want to know the biographies. So we want to know who's involved, what's the background and experience and training of those people, and who will be relied upon for artistic or historical or cultural expertise. And please note, we recognize that historic, artistic, and cultural expertise can be gained in lots of different ways, whether it be through formal education, passed down within a community or a culture, jobs or internships or apprenticeships, non-traditional settings. So please just describe that person and their qualifications, and note that we understand that can be, it's not always a master's degree or a PhD. There's a lot of ways that people can get experience and be a professional in a way. For community benefit, please describe how your proposal will benefit Boise residents and contribute to our cultural community here within Boise. So why is your project meaningful? So what drives the project? Why is it important for our residents to experience that project or program? And also intended audience. So who are you planning or intending to serve through this program? And just because it might have a small audience or a very targeted intended audience, it still can have community benefits. So please don't be scared away if you're thinking, oh, I'm really targeting one specific segment of an audience. That is okay. Please continue to apply. We just want to make sure that you're really clear on how it is benefiting Boise as a whole. And then mission alignment. So the City of Boise really wants to make sure that we are bringing people together and building positive relationships that ultimately help create a city for everyone. So we just ask that you think about how your project or your proposal is achieving that. as well as our Department of Arts and History mission to cultivate a distinct sense of place, which reflects Boise's rich past, diverse communities, and unique natural setting. So think about what it is that you're applying for, the project or program you're attempting to put on, and how it connects to each of those. And we really want to make sure that not only are we supporting you, but we're also supporting the goals and mission of the city and the department. So I mentioned accessibility as a piece. So for us, accessibility for this grant, we're really looking for projects that are affordable. So that means free or low cost experiences. So if there is like a ticket cost for the community, we're looking at $20 or less per person. That is what is most appropriate for this grant program. We also are looking for you to mention any scholarships or financial aid if maybe your ticket prices are on the higher side. That would also help meet that criteria. So keep that in mind as you're thinking through your project. And we're also hoping that it's inclusive. So the project offers accommodations or services related to potentially hearing or visual, physical accessibility, language access, again, scholarships, financial aid. So we're really looking for the project to have ways that they're making accommodations. So as we mentioned, a city for everyone, all Boise residents can participate in that. And then finally, management, we're looking for who's responsible to make sure that the actual project happens and is completed. Have you considered any planning logistics if you're looking to put on a big show? Have you looked into venue costs? Have you already found partners? Those kinds of things. Also thinking about timeline, and have you thought about what success looks like for your program and how you're planning to measure that success? And then finally, just as we mentioned, a budget. So what you plan to spend and what income you're planning to come in to help make the project happen. We do have some special considerations. We're really trying to make sure we're reaching new applicants or first-time applicants. Also, we are hoping that applicants attend or watch later one of these info sessions, or you can meet with staff here to review your application, or maybe it's just to run ideas by me. So we just want to make sure that you have as much support as possible when you're thinking through your application. And then we will take into consideration any outcomes from past year's arts and history grant awards, if applicable. And that's just, if in the past someone didn't turn in a final report, didn't complete their project, and didn't let us know ahead of time, yeah, that may impact your application. But for the most part, we haven't really had that happen. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. All right. So again, just a quick reminder, just continue to add those Q&A in there. So I'm looking at just seeing if there's any I can answer right off the bat. I think we'll save these again to the end, so don't worry, because I might answer some of these in the next few minutes. So I mentioned that we would talk about a few of the types of projects that you could apply for. So they might include, but are in no way limited to, the following: performing arts, visual art, collaborations, initiatives from cultural or community groups, historical or preservation projects. They could be literary based, film. I know that film is another huge one that I don't have on here, but or film related. Also educational programs or workshops, and then exhibits. So these are all things that I know could be proposed, or this list is absolutely not the final list. So if you have other ideas, please let me know, and I'd be happy to let you know if it fits within the scope of this grant program. And we'll just go quickly through a few application basics. If you've applied for our annual grant program before, it should feel very familiar. It's through the Zoom Grants system. Zoom Grants, I think, is can be a little tricky at times. So if you ever have issues, we have resources for you. You can reach out to Zoom Grants. They have a whole Zoom Grants University page where you can learn more about logins and how to submit and all of those kinds of things. There's also a Zoom Grants tutorial, and all of this can be accessed on our webpage, which I will show you where to find that in just a moment. And there's also help and frequently asked questions pages on Zoom Grants. And I highly recommend, if you have any issues, reach out to questions@zoomgrants.com. They have been a lifesaver for many of our grant applicants and grant recipients when you can't, like for instance, you can't access your account, you already have a login and you forgot your password. Or another good example is maybe someone in your organization had previously had an account through Zoom Grants for your organization, and that person has maybe since left and it was tied to their email address. I cannot access, unfortunately, any of your accounts. And so if you have issues with logins or need help with account information, my best advice is going to Zoom Grants U or reaching out to questions@zoomgrants.com directly. And they've been super helpful, sometimes even resolving things within the day. So um, if you have any other questions about Zoom Grants, I'd be happy to meet with you and walk you through that if that is more helpful. But I would say it's pretty similar to what we use for our annual program, so it shouldn't be very different for those of you that have used it before. So continuing with Zoom Grants, to apply, you'll need to create or access your account information. So as I mentioned, if maybe you're applying on behalf of an organization, you will need to reach out to Zoom Grants if you don't have access to that person's email account to reassign to a new one. But they can help you do that pretty easily. But you will need to log in and create a Zoom Grants account. The link to the apply is on our website, which again, I will show you the website access in just a moment. And once you sign in and you can start an application and answer the application questions. And I'll talk about some more tips and tricks for that in just a moment as well. Again, just remember when you log in, the requirements will be to completely answer the application questions that are listed and also include that application budget. Any other attachments, you are able to add them, but they are optional. They are not required. The only required attachment is that budget template that I showed you and walked through. So it's a little different than our annual program where we required, I think, a letter of recommendation and maybe some other attachments. In this case, we only require the budget attachment. And I just want to be very clear, if you need any assistance of any kind, we want to make sure that we can make this accessible for you. So please reach out to me, email, phone, whatever you're most comfortable with. We can help you with language assistance or even persons with disabilities who maybe require additional assistance. Please let us know and we'd be happy to make this accessible to you. And then if you're awarded, so you submit the application, it goes through the panel review process, and you're awarded, we will ask for a signed agreement. And this is very similar to our annual program. It's a signed City of Boise agreement. We also require a W-9, which is a tax document to be able to pay out the grant amount. We also will ask that you submit an invoice through Zoom Grants, and I have a lot of support for that. Once you'll be notified with a notification letter, and also we'll get information on how to do all of these next steps. So don't worry too much now. If you are awarded, we will walk you through these steps. And then finally, you will get 100% of the award upfront. So basically what that means is once your notification letter is sent, you sign the agreement, we get your W-9 and you invoice us for that $2,000 amount, you will be paid out that 100% at the beginning. And that is a little different from our annual program where we split it up 80-20. So just please note that you will receive, again, that full amount upfront. We do ask, though, at the end of your program, you still complete that final report and submit 5 photographs. So there is another step after you receive the funding in order to complete the grant process. So as I mentioned, final report, that will be the final step. If you're awarded and you need to submit it within 30 days of the close of your project, but no later than September 30th. And as I mentioned, round 4, because it comes up really close to that deadline, we do give a few weeks extra to submit that final report. And we do ask that you provide 5 photos as an attachment with your final report. And all of this is done through Zoom grants. And again, if awarded, we will provide you all of the how-to documents and next steps for you to do this easily and quickly. All right. And we're almost done. And then I'll have some time for some of these questions. Thank you so much for submitting them. So just a few suggestions and things to consider for the grant program, for the Catalyst grant program. So thinking through the application questions, review the guidelines and criteria really carefully. And as I mentioned, I'll show you in just a moment. I'll walk you through the website and where to find those things. So just make sure that you're answering the questions and specifically addressing the criteria that is mentioned. So for instance, we're looking for biographies and information about each of the people that will be involved. So make sure to address that within that question. Make sure to say specifically what your project is and how the funding will be used within that project. So just make sure that you're addressing those criteria as you're thinking through your project and answering those application questions. Make sure you're answering the questions thoroughly but concisely. We had a max word amount of 500. We want to make sure that you're answering them completely, but no need to write any novels. Just make sure that you're answering the questions and addressing that criteria. If you need help, please reach out. I'll talk a little bit more about this, but schedule a meeting with me. I'd be happy to review applications, review the proposals, and give feedback. And happy to talk through ideas and see if they, again, fit within the criteria or the scope of this grant program. We also ask that you connect the dots throughout your application. So, making sure you can repeat things. So if there's a very clear goal for your event, you can mention that multiple times, just making sure that it's a very cohesive proposal. And then we ask that you state what will happen instead of saying might or maybe. At times that can just come across as maybe you will not complete the project. Instead, just say what you will or intend to do with the funding and with your project. And then just some suggestions. So we suggest that you apply for the round that makes the most sense for your project. So for instance, let's say you wanted to do something in March, probably this round 1 would be the most effective for your project, March or April. So just think about the timing of when you want your event or your project or program to happen and think about which round makes the most sense for your project. And again, it is your timing. So whatever makes the most sense for you as well and when you have time to apply. Also, if you are not not awarded in round 1, please feel free. You can take feedback that's provided in the notification letter that says no for that round and implement that feedback, and you can apply again for a different round. So if you do apply early, don't get that funding, we do recommend you make any necessary changes to that project or program, but you can apply again within the Catalyst grant in a different round. And I know one question was if I was awarded an annual grant for this fiscal year, am I allowed to apply for one of the rounds of the Catalyst grant program? The answer is yes, as long as you're applying for a different project or program than the awards that you were funded for. So let's say you were funded to complete an event that happened in, maybe it already happened in December. Your application for the Catalyst Grant Program would have to be a different event or a different project or a different program. So you can receive additional funding from the city within this program, but it has to be for a different project. All right, and then a few suggestions for individuals or small groups. Just remember, if you're an individual, you will have to submit a W-9. So there are tax documents that are required to be able to receive funding from the city. So just keep that in mind. Make sure you're aware of that. Also, as I mentioned, you can include in-kind values in your budget. So knowing that smaller organizations or individuals may have more volunteer support, please make sure that you're tracking that and mentioning that in your budget. And also just a quick tip, make sure that you're confirming any partnerships that you're planning on basing the project or program around in advance of applying and making sure they're aware. We want to make sure that you have some, again, that planning and the logistics piece of the criteria. You've thought through who you're partnering with and who's doing what and those kinds of things. So just make sure that you establish those partnerships prior to the application. And then finally, just as I mentioned, I want to be as supportive and helpful as possible. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to pilot these sort of office hours on Wednesdays and some Thursdays, typically between 9 and noon. If that doesn't work for your schedule, please reach out to me. Let me know if there's a better time. You can include that in the email or give me a call and we can schedule something. I'm happy to do so. We also have these information sessions. They're recorded, so you can refer back to them. Also have some of the slides available as well. You can discuss your proposal with me prior to submitting your application. We just ask that it has to be at least 1 week prior to that deadline. So for this timeline, I believe it would just have to be a week prior to February 2nd. That just gives me time to make sure that I can devote attention to them if needed. It's not a requirement to have us read through it, but if you're worried or maybe want some advice or feedback, it's an option. And then also, finally, just please, anytime, reach out, let me know, and I'd be happy to provide support. And then we kind of mentioned this, but if you get the grant, you will just need to follow the instructions provided. We just recommend that you continually refer back to your application, make sure that you're sticking with the plan and the proposal and the project that you intended to complete. And then don't forget to arrange for photographs. So sometimes we get so busy planning and actually, you know, facilitating a project or a program, we forget to document it. So maybe think about someone on your staff or maybe a friend or even hiring a photographer to capture those moments, not only for you, but also for us. We love seeing the work that our cultural community does, and it is a requirement of the final report that you have at least 5 photos.